was kind of thinking about different topics to talk about, and a couple of ideas just keep coming back and over. So I'm gonna kind of go over them. They're kind of like a hodgepodge of different ideas and philosophies that I kind of get into. Well, one of these ideas had to do with frugality, which is actually the name in Muslim countries. Is called Qanaat. Qanaat means making a lot out of nothing, and some people practice this. It's usually also a Muslim virtue, which is what Prophet Muhammad practiced. Actually, when he died, he had only one gold dinar left because he had given everything away. But he also had entire country belonged to him. Uh, so these practices, another practice that Prophet Muhammad had was engage in relations with many women. He had many wives, and spent his money and his time and his attention. He gave it to these many women that he engaged with, and also encouraged Muslims to marry, have kids, and not to be fearful of making families. And before religion of Islam, the Arabs were very fearful of having too many women in their household, because women they were like a drain on the income, and the more women you had, the more negative you went in your expenses. At that time, what made money was men. They could go fight in the war. They could go on trade routes, and they could do many things that women were more confined. And but he banned the practice that the Arabs had in the times of ignorance before Islam, that they used to kill some newborn girls because they're so afraid. This is similar fear that exists in many Western countries, that they are fearful of making marriages, having kids, long-term relationships, making established family structure, and they're more in tune with like traveling pimp or traveling whore that has many relationships everywhere, and she goes and does a little thing here, and he goes and does a little thing there, and they marry in their 50s and maybe have one kid similar to mine. Well, if I had married an Iranian woman, I would probably have like 5, 6 kids. Well, my brother, he married, the second marriage was successful, and he had 5 daughters, and he kept trying to have a son, but he couldn't. So there was no fear of getting into making families or populations. Well, actually, having a large population in a country, some countries are like that. India or Pakistan or China have huge populations, and the people there, similar to Iranians, they have very little fear of women, and having kids with women, or having long-term relationship, or having like several women, if you can muster up the energy or the money. Well, these not having these fears, and not stopping yourself from living a life which is like a natural life, what the human body or human female is capable, or would have done, or does in many countries, is is itself a kind of wealth. Also, such engagement, it prevents other diseases that many people get afflicted in modern society. Well, I think there is a lot of the homosexuality comes from these fears of not taking on women, not taking on wife, and like having a lot of resistance to like usually when men get a lot of income, they become miserly and want to like preserve that wealth or income. But that's completely opposite to what women want to do. Want to make families and spend money. Actually, in the United States, women spend most of the money. The checkbook is with her, and she writes all the big checks for housing, for well, if the people of the United States were like me, and they're so chintzy and made every dollar stretch, and then the whole economy would completely collapse. Well, the reason that we do have an economy, or we have had a good economy, or we might have something good, is because women, they don't treat money the same way. They just, if usually women, they will spend any money on homes or on kids, and they just don't care. Usually this is the reason most marriages fall apart, because she's got the checkbook and she's just writing writing them. But whether that's a good thing, I think that's a good thing, because then usually a man's way of thinking is like, I want to make investment, and in our world, or the world that the American banks or corporations have created, there is no investment. Everything is a complete failure. In fact, the safest investment, like 10-year or 2-year bonds, they're going towards negative yields, because there is some people, politicians, that are more profligate than any woman could be, and they're just burning the cash and publishing more money and bonds. So there is no safe investment. There is no safe investment in housing. A lot of houses are underwater, or they'll be going more underwater later on. There is no safe investments in many places, maybe in precious metals or gold or some cryptocurrencies. But well, a man's way of thinking and preserving the wealth, it just doesn't work. And also at the same time, it damages families, because the family, the kids, the women, they want to spend that money to live a good life. Well, there is an analyst. His name is I think he's in Britain. His name is Manacos64. He was saying that it's better investment to invest the money in your own life, like in buy good clothes, or spend on your wealth, on your health, not your wealth, on good car, or spend money on women, on supplements, vitamins to keep yourself healthy, and or do spend money on gym. Well, these would not seem as good investment for like a banker or a company, but really the return on investment is better these days than investing on T-bills or well, another trend that's happening is that many industries, for example, the taxi industry, which is almost disappearing, they are old industries, the pricing structures or the infrastructure, the companies and the cars they use, they are old industry, and but the new industries and new technologies are coming in. Well, I heard that there is a company that has taxis that are all automated or like use AI or self-driving cars. What happens if another year or two all taxis are like that? Or where is going to be the income? Or where is going to be the taxi company industry as it existed 10 years ago? Or they're going to be dead. But this has repeated in many other industries, and but the technology cuts down the cost and also cuts down the jobs. So if the government came up with like a basic income or other forms of jobs that people could make an income, that would be a better investment than if we invested in preserving older industries or zombie companies as they are called now. These ideas keep getting reshuffled around. I hear them with many analysts. They kind of know what's going to happen in a year or two ahead of the crowd. Well, if many of these zombie companies they died, actually it would be better for many Americans or many people, and also for the government, because our economy is like a tiny bike that a massive, very overweight person is riding this tiny bike. Well, we are actually subsidizing many of these zombie companies, many of these banks that they should have been dead a very long time ago. And if that money that is being pooped on was distributed, even if the public got a fraction of that money and spent it just on itself, then the economy would be much better. And also the good thing that it does is that this money would be spent a lot more intelligently and would go to industries that the rest of us, not the 1%, but the other 99%, think that this industry would be valuable, or we should do that. Also would be a better use or more efficient use of capital. When I was working in Laguna Beach about, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, maybe longer, and I was in a period of time where the taxi companies were losing customers left and right to the Uber. Uber had just come in, but now they have Lyft and other companies. And I was renewing my taxi license, and I was talking to the lady in, there is an office, you go in, there's a commission, and she checks out your records, and you shouldn't have felonies, and you shouldn't have too many misdemeanors, and you have to pay a fee, and get a license, this background check. And I was talking to her, and I told her, this is probably the last time that I will be renewing this taxi license. And she said that, well, that's kind of sad because your license, the number was very low, means that it was very old license. You know, many companies, they knew me. And I told her that what if, like in a year or two, there's this piece of printed circuit, or this is exactly what happened, or what's happening, of or a bit of software that somebody puts in any car, and then the car just drives people everywhere, just like a taxi. Doesn't complain, doesn't need tips, or doesn't get pissed off. Uh, what happens if my job becomes like that, or I become totally redundant? Maybe I should look for elsewhere, which actually what's exactly has happened. And I kind of moved away from that industry. I moved into, I did a few more years of security guard work, and I'm going back to that too. Well, when I compare these two kinds of jobs, the taxi work, it required all these input, all these. Yeah, I had to budget myself for gasoline. I had to work certain hours. If I didn't work those hours, a lot of the income would be gone. I couldn't afford to stop working like Friday, Saturday night, Sunday, but Sunday most of the daytime. That's where all the customers were coming in. And then what happened is I developed disabilities. I went blind on the left eye, and even though I have a lot of experience, it became a chore. You had to watch out all the time to catch your mistakes, and I could maintain working like that with just one functioning eye for another year or two. I had to stop working at night because the lights, the kind of night lights, kind of blinded me. I had to be more careful. So, like I was becoming redundant or outmoded, and the industry too, along with me, was becoming useless and outmoded, and all the customers were also going to Uber, and also younger drivers were coming in. And well, this is exactly the same process that's happening with many American companies. They make old products. Most of the good stuff is made in China, in Vietnam, in Korea, and they cannot compete with price. Just like me, I couldn't compete with the Uber and the younger drivers, and also I will never be able to compete with self-driving cars or self-driving taxi companies. So just it was a commercial death that was inevitable, and I knew at the time that this was happening. I was conscious of it happening, and well, but this is not something that many American companies are conscious of, that they either have died and they are a zombie, or that they are going to be dead. Well, what I did is move into different industries that I could do, and I'd done security for like 20 years before. I worked for many security companies, and then I went back and I started making even more money, and the companies, they wouldn't want to lose me no matter what, even though I'm a complete bitch. Anything you do that's not right, you're gonna get zapped, or have the cops give you an interview. Well, I was the guy who people would get in trouble right away. Uh, I told some of the superintendents that I don't want to see you in the job site at night where I used to work. I don't care. I don't want people when they are not supposed to be there. I was very strict, and even though I had lost one industry, I was able to go into another industry. Well, that's exactly what many companies should be doing. They should be figuring out where are we going wrong, what's our business model, instead of getting cheap loans from the government and buying their shares back and extending their life. Well, I did some of that. I mean, I had developed disabilities, and also the industry itself was dying. So I kind of, went along a little bit, tried to save whatever income that there was coming, but then I knew I had to change, and I went along with the change. When you do things like this, when you're conscious of changes and you adopt, there is a gradual pain, but also a gradual shifting to other industries or other professions that you can do, then the pain is not very bad. Well, I was listening to Peter Schiff and Gregory Mannarino, and they also Kaiser report, they all think that something very bad is going to happen to U.S. economy, like a very severe recession, and many think that Trump is going to lose his bid for second term, which is, I think, is very likely. Well, some people, they're not leaders. Trump said all this stuff, and the place has a very significant problems, but he just went along with the policies of the past, and look where we are now. Well, I think the general trend is that better technology will come along. It doesn't matter if the Americans, they don't want better technologies. They are happy with the old technologies, because this is not how technology or civilization progresses. And usually these technologies, they evolve initially in the United States in some Department of Defense project, and the technology or the ideas, they seep out, or somebody steals them, like the North Koreans, they steal it off of their servers in the United States, and then it goes into all kinds of places in Russia, and they have these needs. They don't have all these tremendous amount of cash to throw at anything, and their industries, they don't pay people as much, and they for example, they don't spend as much money on weapons projects or developing them. So they'll utilize this new technology, and it evolves again over there. I can see that like many weapons that the Russians have developed, many weapons or technologies that the North Korean or Chinese have, they were initially Americans. They were invented or brought about here, but they don't have this oligarchy, this elite that's very used to things as they are, because they're benefiting from things as they are. So that technology evolves and becomes feasible very cheaply in faraway places, and then it seeps back into the United States, and then when it does, it destroys all the established companies that rely on older technologies. Just like the taxi company got blown away by the Uber, and then other countries, and then maybe even Uber will completely change, become entirely machinery, like a self-driving car. Well, the Americans, they're probably going to like have all these lawsuits and bad mouth this technology, but this is not the only place in the world. Other countries, they will come along and use that technology, and then the established companies here will just have no choice but to go there. Another idea that I think people should look into it is that when a country has a huge population, well, Iran is becoming like that. It has a lot of kids that are growing up there. There is a large pool of talented, very cheap to hire employees that the government can, sponsor different industries. Many industries that took off in China or Iran or India, they were initially financed by the government, and then gradually investors inside the country, they bought up these industries, and now they are major companies like Toyota, or these companies were all sponsored by the government and then or subsidized, but then the company took off, and that's a great thing. But on personal level, I think that's a really good thing. I usually look at my expenses and see where I can cut corners and still get the same output. For example, there is a concept of frugality in seeing where you can save money. This is great because it also promotes the growth of better industries, more leaner and more advanced. I look at the amount of gasoline I buy, like how much I can cut back on my travels. So I usually try to like make a route, do several things with the same kind of amount of driving. I also try to cut back on using cars. I have two cars. One has 8-cylinder, which I only use to go to security guard companies, the Crown Victoria, but usually use a 4-cylinder for daily like run around. I also make a route, but cutting back on gasoline or switching to cars that are electric, it forces companies to come up with cars or products that are also cheaper, because they are seeing the other end of this equation, which means like thousands of people like me trying to save or portion of population. That's exactly what happened when many companies started making 4-cylinder cars in the 70s or 80s instead of 8-cylinder cars. But now they're going into electric cars. Usually, as before, like Tesla has developed many electric cars, but their cars are expensive, and their technology is something that they developed. But then this technology is going to seep into many foreign countries, and you don't know, Toyota might come up, or some Indian company come up with the electric car, which is like $5,000 new, just like a bike. I've seen some smaller cars that they have made. This industry is going to become like miniaturized, like many airplanes that are now drones, and the drone does all the stuff that airplane does, but you don't have to hire a pilot. And this is a very nice trend. The collapse in cost or price of things. And also, even though there is some pain that we have to manage, just like losing the taxi companies, well, if you manage it in a gradual basis, then it will be much more rewarding. Well, thank you very much for putting up with me and my endless discourse on these topics. I'm very much interested. I also think that the more one lives life according to traditional lifestyle of family or extended family, the more healthy or mentally okay person you're gonna be, and the economy is gonna reflect that. Please don't be shy. Subscribe and leave comment.